Joining me from Irvine, California to help us make sense of it all, a recently retired Orange County Superior Court judge and author of Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It, Judge Jim P. Gray is here. Welcome, Your Honor. How are you?
Well, it's nice to be with you, and it's good to talk about this important topic.
Now, Jim, you're part of a growing coalition of civil servants who are advocating the legalization of marijuana. What exactly brought you to this decision?
Well, you look back over my professional life, and I was a former drug warrior in the United States Attorney's Office, a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, been a judge for 25 years in the trial court here in Orange County, California, and you just look back over that time period and see, are we in better shape today because of these efforts or not? And the answer clearly is no. It depends how you might describe what our goals are, but if our goal is fewer crimes, less drugs available for our children, more civil liberties, or on and on, we're just not doing it well. So I came to that realization and decided, you know something, a conservative judge in a conservative county who has never used marijuana or any other illicit drug can at least get people to discuss the issue. So I've been doing this for a number of years now, and we're making progress because people are beginning to discuss it, and, of course, because of the huge violence that's now spilling over into our country from Mexico and other places. So people are now receptive to the discussion. It's time to talk sense. It's time to realize that we have options to this failed and hopeless policy of drug prohibition, and then it's time to start utilizing some of those options.
Well, Jim, with regard to this war on drugs, you write in your book that the drug war is, quote, wasting unimaginable amounts of our tax dollars. It's increasing crime and despair and severely and unnecessarily harming people's lives. But I mean, there has to be some sort of upside to this war for it to have been going on for so long.
I would have to ask you and our viewers, you tell me, think of one positive thing that's come out of drug prohibition. I can't think of anything positive from this terribly harmful prohibition that we have been foisted upon ourselves.
Well, here in California, Assemblyman Tom Amiano is actually trying to legalize marijuana. And what would this bill that he's proposed, what would that actually do?
It's Assembly Bill 390, and it would basically directly treat marijuana like alcohol. However, there's a proviso in it that will only go into effect 30 days after the federal government changes its laws, because this would now be a violation of federal law. But he talks about several things. Number one, he talks about taxing the stupid stuff. And when I was at the press conference with Mr. Amiano, the chair of the State Board of Equalization in California also was there, a lady named Betty Yee, and she said that her government had looked forward through this and had determined that we could generate tax revenue of at least $1.3 billion every year in the state of California alone. So those are funds that are not being taxed at the moment. Of course, we would have to decrease the price by at least half to drive the illegal drug dealers out of business, but even so, $1.3 billion would be quite a difference. He also recognizes that we're now spending in California taxpayer money of at least $1 billion every year in a futile effort to eradicate marijuana, as well as prosecute and incarcerate nonviolent marijuana offenders. And of course, you can tell how successful we are in eradicating marijuana, because today it's the largest cash crop in the state of California. As I tell people, grapes is number 2, but marijuana is number 1. So it's fully available. Let's just recognize that. Let's utilize it. Let's regulate it, control it, and tax it, and we'll be an awful lot better off.
Jim, finally, because we're running out of time, I need to bring up the disaster scenario here for my mother, who's very concerned. Let's say marijuana does become legal here in California or even nationally. What happens next? I mean, are we going to see Amsterdam-style cafes in the public? Are Camel and Marlboro, are they going to be selling it out of the 7-Elevens next to the Slurpees? What about the kids, Jim?
Sure. Well, and fair enough. You know, what we should do is, again, go to allow each state to choose the best way for its people. So then if Kansas comes up with something that doesn't work, but Nebraska comes up with something that does, Kansas will tend to go toward Nebraska's approach. I envision where it will be regulated and controlled for adults, brown packaging. The government has to own it so that there's no advertising. That's key, because if Philip Morris owned this or stuff, they would have a First Amendment right to advertise, to push it over the airwaves, which I certainly do not want to do. But we're not going to be a nation of zombies under any circumstances, and basically people will experience, in my view, that effect that they have realized in Holland, where they've made it boring. So they've taken the profit motive out of it, they've taken the glamour out of it, and then a lot of people will find out, this just isn't for me. Some of the people will come down the ladder and instead of using cocaine or alcohol might decide to use marijuana. In a lot of ways, that would be a good thing because marijuana is less harmful than the drug I use, which is basically wine. So I don't envision a problem with this. Once the novelty wears off, I think that people will basically kind of treat it in a humdrum sort of way, and then knowing that they'll be held accountable for their actions if they drive a motor vehicle or otherwise, it'll become pretty much a medical health problem instead of a criminal justice problem, and I think your mother will be pleased with the results.
Who is winning today with regard to this failed policy? And I have 6 groups. Travel along with me and see if you agree. The first group, obviously, are the drug lords. Big-time drug dealers. They're making hundreds of millions, billions of dollars every year, tax-free, by the way, and they're clearly winning. The number 2 group of people that are winning are those in juvenile gangs. Pretty much every juvenile gang we have in our country gets its primary source of funding for the sale of illegal drugs, and now they're using it as a recruiting tool to bring more children into this lifestyle because they too can be part of the action and make some money. Number 3 group of people that are winning are basically those in law enforcement that are making big-time government money to fight against the first 2 groups. And I'm not pointing the finger at law enforcement. They haven't failed us any more for the war on drugs than Eliot Ness failed us with regard to the war on alcohol. But it's the system. But nevertheless, their bureaucracies have expanded, their amounts of money, their power have all expanded as well. They're winning. 4th group of people are the politicians that basically talk tough with regard to the war on drugs, not smart, but they get elected and re-elected by talking tough. Of course, it's our fault because we continue to elect them, but they come out ahead. Number 5 groups are those in the private sector that make money because of increased crime. Who might that be? Obviously, the people that build prisons, enormously lucrative occupation. People that staff prisons. In the state of California, the Prison Guards Union is the strongest political lobby group we have. They're winning, and of course, they're laughing at us. And the 6th group of people that are winning are the terrorist organizations of the world. You look at any terrorist organization from Osama bin Laden or anywhere else, the primary source of funding is drug money. It's the sale of illegal drugs, to the degree that I say that drug prohibition is the golden goose of terrorism. And if our government really wanted to do something damaging to terrorist groups around the world, they would take the one step that would do that: repeal drug prohibition. Who is losing? Everybody else. I've been speaking actively against our nation's drug policy since 1992. The first national TV show I was on, they basically stacked it with a lot of parents of drug problems for their kids. And the first question I got was, why are you trying to kill my son? And it kind of got worse from there. That doesn't happen anymore. People are beginning to understand. There is an initiative now in California to treat marijuana like alcohol for adults. What would happen if this were to pass? Well, 6 things. The first 5 demonstrably beneficial, then we'll talk about the 6th. The first thing that would happen is we in the state of California as taxpayers literally could save hundreds of millions of dollars per year, if not $1 billion a year, that now we actually spend in a futile effort to try to eradicate marijuana as well as to prosecute and incarcerate nonviolent marijuana offenders. And of course, you can tell how successful we are in the eradication of marijuana because it's still the largest cash crop in the state of California. And number 2 is grapes, by the way, if you care. So that's $1 billion or so that we can save. Number 2, we could tax the silly stuff and generate revenue, according to the chair of the State Board of Equalization, of about $1.3 billion every year. So now that's about a $2.3 billion shift in the budget deficit for the state of California. You'd think somebody would notice. But the third thing trumps the first 2, and that is we would make marijuana less available for children than it is today. That is something that really does deserve a great deal of attention. Number 4, the entire hemp industry could be revitalized. Goes back thousands of years to the degree that in ancient Greek the word canvas and cannabis were synonymous. They were the same word. And we have simply thwarted that entire really important industrial purpose. We do have our merchants using hemp today, and by the way, hemp, you know, is just the stalk of the marijuana plant. It has no mind-altering properties whatsoever, but it can be used for all kinds of really beneficial purposes. So now our merchants import the raw material from those radical countries like Canada and England, for heaven's sake, penalizing ourselves and our own agricultural purposes. You'd think that we could somehow realize what's going on, because the Canadian hemp field is worth, you know, about $1 billion a year. And the fifth thing, this entire medical marijuana issue would pretty much dissolve, and hooray for that. It would get some control on it, regulate it, control it, tax it, and bring it back under the law. Then there's the sixth thing. What's that going to do to marijuana usage by adults? And any economist, of course, will tell you that's really pretty simple. It will increase marijuana use by adults, all things being equal. But all things are not going to be equal. We'll probably soon start experiencing what I call the Holland effect. Because in Holland, anybody 16 years of age or older can go to a coffee house and can get coffee and sandwiches and tea and also marijuana and hashish. The Minister of Health of Holland held a press conference not all that long ago and said, we in our country have only half the marijuana consumption per capita as you do in the United States of America, both for adults and for teenagers. Wait a minute, you hear that? Both for adults and for teenagers. Then went on to explain why. You know what he said? He said, we have succeeded in making pot boring. People that are supporting the status quo are on the wrong side of history. Just like the people that the Billy Sundays and the Anslingers and the rest who supported alcohol prohibition were on the wrong side of history. It's just a question of when. And then I guarantee anyone who will listen that 2 years after we change away from this failed and hopeless policy, everybody will join arms, look back astonished, aghast that we could have perpetuated such a failed system for so long.
I'd like to talk about children for a couple of minutes, because today our marijuana laws are putting our children in harm's way. We are continuing with this failed program for all of its defects, so-called, because we want to reduce the exposure of a lifestyle of marijuana usage and marijuana selling to our children, and it's doing the opposite. Today, it is easier for our young people to get marijuana than it is alcohol. And if you don't want to listen to me, ask any teenagers you can find. They will tell you that because of alcohol prohibition, marijuana prohibition. And Reverend Richardson kind of stole one of my lines, because it's true, because the illegal dealers do not ask for ID. So let's make it less available for children by regulating and controlling it. Number two, adult drug dealers will recruit children to sell drugs. They will recruit them into their own drug distribution system. For $50 in cash, you can buy all of the 15, 16-year-olds in the inner city or anywhere else that you want to. It's chump change for the adult drug dealer. It's lots of money for a kid. So you use them as gophers and lookouts and couriers, and as soon as their reliability is established, then they're trusted to sell small amounts of drugs out in the communities. And who do they sell to if they're out there doing it? I assure you, no one in this room. They're going to sell to their 14, 15, 16-year-old peers. That is despicable, and it's caused by drug prohibition. So I say, let's reverse that, let's turn it around, let's regulate it, let's control it, because this prohibition is not working. I believe it fervently. I'm so concerned about our children. I'm so concerned about these illegal marijuana out there with all of its ramifications. I want to reduce those harms by passing your legislation, and I commend you again for these hearings.